Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I have an amazing guest on the show today, Dr. Marcella Raimondo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, before we dive into today's topic, could you please share with the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Let's see, I am a psychologist. I work with folks with eating disorders, disordered eating, chronic dieting, emotional eating, stress eating, and body image concerns. I'm also a trainer. I've been doing this work and going to clinics and work settings and providing trainings for folks on how to address eating disorders and body image and stress eating in their practice, in their clinics, in their work settings. I'm also an activist. I've been doing this work in terms of how to make treatment more accessible, but also how we talk about food in our bodies, how manipulative diet culture is, and so how we can live a life of liberation with food in our bodies and also how to access treatment and make treatment more accessible for folks so that way folks can heal. And then I'm a person who has lived experience with anorexia, and so I had this as a teen and in my early 20s, and it's just through my lived experience. It's just something that I have I've developed, I guess, just like my own understanding, which is my understanding. I don't pretend to know everyone's, stories and understanding, but it does give me, in ways like the compassion and patience, and knowing that this is a hard journey for folks to work through, and it's very much worth it to work through. And because I have worked through it, and come to a place to where I am, I absolutely want this for everybody. And so the fact that some folks can't access treatment or treatment's not affordable is heartbreaking and also very upsetting to me, because I couldn't imagine like not being able to access it. I couldn't imagine having to struggle and suffer so much.
Mm. And speaking about the access, because that's something I'm curious about, how accessible is it? Is it easily accessible to get treatment for eating disorders, or is it hard to get into a treatment center, or is it just general? You just generally go to the hospital?
I would say pre-pandemic, it was really hard. You had to use your insurance if you had insurance. If you don't, it was really hard to try to get services in let's say low fee or free health clinics. I'm I'm in the state of California, and so also trying to understand our various counties and our counties' mental health programs and how they didn't have the means and the resources to provide eating disorder treatment. So it was hard. It was very hard. And if you had insurance and treatment, you had very limited treatment, and it's time consuming and expensive. And so a lot of insurances were hesitant about providing so much insurance, looking at going to residential programs that were like $1,000 a day. And so it was hard. Now, I'm not saying like we've crossed the threshold and we're absolutely yay, but saying that because of the pandemic, there's been more online resources available and more online programs. There are various organizations like Equip and Project Heal that are really working so hard to provide accessible treatment. They take insurances. I believe there are also like there are programs that take more Medi-Cal, and this is in I'm just going on in the state of California for just those that need that type of who are low income and need that support. And so in terms of the accessibility, it has gotten better. In terms of also aspects of how affirming eating disorders treatment is, in terms of folks who are marginalized, folks who didn't quite fit this like profile of who gets an eating disorder, which is often seen as these like very teenage, young, affluent white girls, and or cisgender girls. And so There's also been a lot of challenges in the field to look at, like, what are the services that we're offering, and they're geared for they're geared for the stereotype. And if you don't see yourself, then you have a hard time recognizing that you may have an eating disorder and that you may need help. And if you go to a service and it's not affirming to you, and there's a way it's still being delivered as if it's still catering for the stereotype, you don't feel seen and validated. And so folks have left treatment as well, because an eating disorder is so nuanced, it's so personal, it's so deep. And so having treatment that really acknowledges that depth of a struggle, and also who you are in this struggle, is so critical for healing.
Mm. Well, I'll have to admit, I've been talking to a few of my clients recently, and they were telling me about their teenage sons and how they're not eating at school. And, one of them was saying it's body issues, wanting to lose weight. And his mum was trying to educate him on, you need to eat and all the rest of it. Another one was sort of saying that he doesn't want to have to go to the toilet at school because that would be embarrassing. So he'd rather not eat while he's at school so he doesn't have to go to the toilet. So I will have to admit that, I probably had that stereotypical thought that most sort of disordered eating or eating disorders was more female. But now talking to more people, there is definitely, a portion of the male population as well.
Absolutely. And yes, when we're constantly sold the stereotype, it's not anyone's fault. Like, oh wow, I had the stereotype. Oh dear. It's like, well, that's what we've been sold. That's what we've been shown. I mean, anytime there's some type of special or dramatization story of someone with an eating disorder, it's always a cisgender female. And so if we were to have more stories of different folks with eating disorders, like cisgender boys, like Black women, like older folks, like folks who are neurodiverse, folks who with physical disabilities, it would really expand our lens as to who gets an eating disorder. And so, like, hearing these stories of boys in school who are having a lot of body image distress, like, it's not an anomaly. It's not like, oh, that must be rare. It's like, not at all. But we are still just not quite up, just not there to expand our thinking. And so it makes me sad and upset hearing, like there are young folks that are just suffering needlessly.
Mm. And how do you think, we obviously know that diet culture has affected, the rates of eating disorders, but now more than ever, I think with social media and, all of these things that, young kids have access to, how do you think they are sort of shaping people's beliefs around food and healthy eating and, potentially body image as well?
It's having a pretty terrible effect. And there used to be, like, diet culture in and of itself was already bad in terms of like the images. Like, I grew up in the magazine era, so like flipping through magazines and being told, like, put the magazines away. And so I could literally just put the magazine away, and then just go about my day and be like, oh my God, I'm just like, butterflies. But when you're bombarded by social media, and it's just really getting into your head, like, just as a young person, like, that's your world. And also, like, diet culture and what it says and it does, like, diet culture just revolves around the notion of, like, you must be thin, and you must be thin at all costs. And if you're not thin, it's your fault, you're undisciplined. And if you experience weight stigma for not being thin, that's the price you pay for not being thin. I mean, diet culture is cruel. And it's also has a lot, tremendous capitalist components too, about, like, that kind of longing and wanting and desiring just makes you buy products over and over again. And this is nothing new. I mean, these like this kind of analysis of media and diet culture has been happening since like 80s, 90s, of like, yeah, there's a manipulative aspect that keeps us to be consumers for life. And also, diets don't work. We've, this has started in the 1950s with studies. We're seeing it now. Like, our bodies are not meant to go through these extreme measures to lose weight, and to lose weight forever. Like our bodies just don't understand this, and so there's our bodies respond back. And so, but yet we're told like, but you can, and when this happens, you'll be thin, and you'll be thin for the rest of your life, and your life will be great. And so we are bought into this. It is very manipulative. It is hard because it pulls on our emotions, and when we're pulling on our emotions, we get caught up into that. What's getting more and more alarming too is just the way social media is coming in. Like we're on our phones, it's on Instagram, it's on Snapchat. There are various algorithms that are really watching what we are doing. And so just with a lot of young folks are just so manipulated by all these products. There's various studies. There's a Kids for Fair Safe, I can't get the name of the act right, but it is really looking at what is happening with kids and social media, and how there's profit to be made from Meta, and Meta is making millions and millions of dollars in terms of how it is sponsoring, selling, um, just eating disorders, or just content and products that really create and promote eating disorders. I mean, one example I'll just give, and this is kind of like a stereotypical, but like when someone announces they're engaged and they put it on social media, you're excited. You might take a picture of you and your partner like together sharing a kiss, or being like, I said yes, kind of thing. And of course of course share that. But what Meta and social media does is it takes that, like, aha, emotional, this event, the wedding's coming up. So then you start to get messages around weight loss products.
That's
And
it.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh, yeah. And when you're in that place, and we put all the hype we put around the wedding and all, and so when someone's emotional in that vulnerable place and wants this this wedding, they're probably going to start pursuing weight loss products. Don't blame folks. Um, but that kind of underhanded, watchful, oh, this is what you announce, and there's an algorithm set up to probably like engage or this or that. So that way, when you write that down, you will get advertising on your social media.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people probably don't think about very often. It's just like, oh, there's another ad. They haven't thought about how the algorithm tracks what they're doing and viewing and writing, and then everything is tailored around that to be able to advertise to you. But I do want to mention too, just recently with all the sort of movie award ceremonies and music award ceremonies that have been happening, I saw one of the celebrities, or a couple of them actually, putting up photos of them getting into corsets and how tight they were getting their corsets pulled up. And to me, that was really shocking, because I was like, have we not progressed from, corsets were worn in the, 1800s or whatever, and we saw the damage that they can do, not just to our, own body image, but our organs, our internal systems. And here we are with celebrities again putting up photos saying, oh, look how tiny my waist is, getting into these corsets, and probably maybe not thinking about how this is affecting, again, women in general that are looking to look like these people and their own body images.
Right. And I didn't know that, because I mean, I did watch the Oscars, but I didn't see some of like the pre-Oscar shows. But I can imagine, yeah, wow, that must have happened. I do remember seeing stars, like folks walking in and seeing these very tight dresses, and like and bodies in them, like, okay. And I could also, and I'm not blaming the actors and actresses at all, because I'm also like imagining, what if one of these I'll just say actresses, just and I'll just use it like she, decided like, I don't want to wear a corset. God, that I'm going to be miserable. I won't be able to eat or drink. And God, can you imagine going to the bathroom in this? I have to undo. I'm going to be uncomfortable all night. Why don't I just wear a dress and just let my body be my body? I couldn't imagine the kind of scrutiny this person might get, the kind of zeroing and circling her stomach, the kind of really nasty comments. And I could imagine that her marketability and being able to get a next movie role. So I'm hearing this. I'm like, God, have and your question is so fair. Like, haven't we not like moved on from this? And it's like clearly not. That they're like Hollywood and other places are still money making, capitalist, kind of misogynistic places. And particularly, I'm thinking for women, still having to maintain a certain kind of body and youthfulness in order to get a role in a movie. I mean, it's just it continues to be really upsetting.
Well, it'd be a lot of pressure too. But then,
Right.
we've got both ends, and in the sense that we've got the actors and the actresses having to maintain, it might be a certain weight or a certain look to get certain roles and maybe land, advertising deals and things. And then we've got the public that are looking towards these people who are then, emulating what they're doing because they can see that that brings success, or it potentially looks like joy and happiness and status. And so, how do we then create a healthy body image that may not be directly related back to all these images we're viewing all the time?
Right. Well, first, I mean, um, like folks are using social media in their own way now. So folks are there are plenty of incredible activists who are like, I'm going to use this platform to put my body out there. I'm going to I'm going to use this platform to say like this is who I am. I'm going to take pictures of myself enjoying myself, and I feel like body image is one of these things that healing and body image happens in a collective. I run various body image groups at my work, and I have this rule of like, I need a group of people in order to run the group because it's not about me saying, feel better, feel better, feel better. It's about the group saying, how do we support each other? How do we listen to each other's stories? And how do we encourage each other to kind of take back your body in a way? And so, I truly believe in that kind of collective and that kind of it's scary, and I wouldn't ever want someone to put themselves out there and be subject to cruelty. So it's just like, how do we move as a collective to be inclusive of all bodies, particularly bodies that are often invisibilized? And so folks who are in large bodies, folks who have physical disabilities, folks who are um, folks, BIPOC folks, and so just like folks that we're not seeing, like those folks need to be centered more. And also, in a world of body image where we're trying to center folks that we don't see often, how do we also, which makes me very upsetting to say, but I have to, is like, how do we also protect folks that we want to center so they don't have to receive the backlash? Because there is going to be a gnarly backlash. So I don't want to create yet. As I'm talking, I just feel this kind of like opposition happening, and I feel like our world is in a pretty oppositional place right now, as we're all experiencing and seeing with so much violence. So I don't want to create yet another opposition with body image. So it's just like, how do we just embrace that so that our bodies can be bodies, and we can relax together, we can enjoy ourselves together, we can do things that we want to do with our bodies.
Well, I don't think there's an easy answer or a right answer. I think I know, as you know, being a parent myself of two girls, yeah, I just try to teach them that, you know, you need to love your body. It doesn't matter what size it is. It doesn't have to look a certain way. You know, we embrace everybody. It's more about kindness and what's on the inside than what's on the outside. So I think, you know, trying to reinforce those messages with your own children, you know, be really accepting. And I'm also very conscious of what I say, you know, about my appearance and that when I'm around my kids, not to be, you know, overcritical. Having had disorder eating when myself, growing up as a dancer and, you know, coming through the other side of that, it is something that I'm always, you know, in the back of my mind, you know, just thinking about trying to create more of that positivity around our bodies rather than focusing on anything that may be negative. Even if, sometimes you put on a dress and in your head you're like, huh, that doesn't look very good, it doesn't sit right, I don't feel, good in this dress, sort of thing. It's not something that I'm going to voice. And then I have to constantly even just work on myself saying, no, we just need to be, positive about it. It's not your body, it's just this dress doesn't suit your body. So I think it's a work in progress for everybody. But if we can try to reinforce some of those positive messages with, our kids, that can definitely help as they're growing up as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, I've been working with folks and they have this separation of like, well, my body's this thing, but I'm a nice person. And I want to say, like, you're a nice person and your body's also a wonderful thing. And you and your body are connected. So I love what we're trying to like raise our kids in a body positive saying environment and world in terms of like, think about the impact you have on people, your kindness, your generosity, how you speak and hold your truth. And like, what do you like to do in your body? Do you want to dance? Do you want to play a sport? Do you want to do martial arts? Or do you want to take a walk and feel the pond, feel water running through your feet? Like I also, it's also like keep kids connected to their bodies. And then that reminder, like you are your body. And when you are taking care of your body can do the activities you want to do, from dancing to playing football, soccer to martial arts. And those are just like very physical activities, but there are just other activities too. So,
Mm. Well, I definitely know, with my girls, encouraging them to, take up the activities that make them feel good, it lights up their sort of joy from within. Like you said, whether or
mhm.
not that's a sport or a music or whatever. But I think fostering that connection to your body so that you can listen to its signals, and those signals may be, hunger signals. They may be, oh, this is feeling a bit sore. There's lots of different signals our bodies can give us.
Food, yeah,
And the more we're in tune with it, I think then the more that when we're presented with, you know, situations where, we might not feel like we fit in, then it's easier to be okay in those situations because we are more connected to ourselves.
right.
Now, when it comes to, there may be people listening in that have a loved one that maybe they think maybe just battling a little bit with, their nutrition intake. They might see that they're maybe restricting their eating or they're constantly talking about wanting to lose weight. What advice do you have for them if they're, trying to support maybe, their daughter or their son or their niece or their nephew, and they can start to see some of these traits coming through, but they're just not sure how to approach the situation or if they should even say anything or do anything?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it comes up and folks often share like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And that's real, because it's hard. I think food is a very touchy topic, and so thinking about how do we intervene? How do we kind of like know like what is happening? And what I say to folks, when they're wanting to know like a a kid or a youngster with does a kid or a youngster have an eating disorder? And what I say is like not focus on weight, like are they thin enough? If they're not thin enough, I guess they're fine. And more pointing out like, well, weight loss is only one indication. Like there could be other things, like noticing if your kid or youngster has withdrawn not just from eating and pulling away, but from social activities. Is there more of an isolation happening? And so that would be an important time to say, what's happening? I notice you're pulling away. Does something feel unsafe? Did something happen to you? Are your needs not getting met? Is it hard to voice what is happening for you? And then perhaps starting to ask questions like, are you trying to cope in ways? Are you trying to cope through food or other things? Like, are you trying to cope through alcohol, drugs? Are you trying to cope through, let's say, cutting or, just other things? And so I think just coming in saying, I'm noticing the pulling away. Tell me about that. Tell me what is happening for you. Um, I think sometimes, and I'm working with families more and more, I mean, parents love their kids. And so like, and I just want to say like parents are not to blame for eating disorders. Parents care. And it's hard, I'm sure, watching your kid who's struggling and you want to fix that. And that's coming from an absolute place of love. And with that, knowing like when we jump in, like, I just want to fix it because I want the pain for you to go away, that's total love. And from the kid's perspective, what I've seen is also like, I just want you to hear me out. And when you fix it, it feels like a bypass, as opposed to just hear me out and ask, like, is there anything I can do? What can I do? It's hard seeing you suffer like this. What are you trying to tell me? And might be also the kid might say, or youngster might say, I don't know. And it might be like, okay, can we revisit this again? Maybe you need some time to think. Maybe I just need to pull away for you to gather your thoughts. So that those are just some thoughts I have when you're noticing like your kid and youngster is really struggling. Um, Also, you asked like too when someone's talking about I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight, and asking folks like first of all, I think like acknowledging like and it doesn't matter what size someone is. Well, to yes and no, because folks in larger bodies deal with so much more weight stigma than folks in thinner bodies. And in fact, folks in thinner bodies don't so much deal with it. So hearing when someone's in a larger body saying over and over again, I want to lose weight, like that, yeah, weight stigma is hard. Yeah, we live in a culture where we are encouraged to do that. Yeah, we are sold some kind of happiness. And for some folks, it's like, I just want to not experience weight stigma. And so just really acknowledging that pain and acknowledging that oppression helps. And then asking folks like, what do you hope to gain from weight loss? How do you see your life differently? What are you going to do? How much are you willing to compromise your quality of life for weight loss? How much are you willing to compromise it for an end result that doesn't really work? Even though we're sold that it works, it doesn't. So are you willing to do all of this for a temporary weight loss? Because it is temporary.
Mm.
And and um and asking, and folks might share like I want these things, like and folks often share like I want opportunities. I want to be connected. I want to meet people. And so they talk about aspects around belonging. I'm like, yeah, of course you want those things, and weight stigma will pull that away from you. But what weight loss gives you is not belonging, but it gives you fitting in. And you can fit in, and then when you regain the weight, you will not be in anymore. There's no belonging there. It's just you fit in because you meet a criteria. And if you don't meet that criteria, you're bumped out. You're bumped out in a heartbeat. So it's it's acknowledging that folks want that, and asking folks like, there are a lot of resources that can work with you to help you like move through this pain, to help you like challenge and look at with a lot of curiosity and compassion your desires for weight loss, despite the weight stigma, thin, valued, oppressive society we live in. Yeah.
Mm. Wow, that's complex, isn't it? I do.
Yeah.
But I do love how you brought up, the idea of talking about why you want to lose the weight and what you think, the changes will be from that. Because I think so many people just focus on the weight loss and they don't think about anything else because they think once I lose the weight, everything else will just change. And that's not what tends to happen, especially when
Right.
there's those emotions involved. And obviously, as we were sort of saying, those complex feelings and, situations. But how do you find in this day and age with, Ozempic's been in the news recently, which is, a drug to help with diabetes, but it's now used a lot for weight loss and is prescribed by doctors for weight loss. And then we also have the rise of gastric band surgery. So the numbers for that has been steadily increasing quite a lot in the recent years as well.
I'm very concerned. And I'm concerned. Like I listened to a panel by this really phenomenal organization called Body Trust, and they hosted a panel of various folks from a nurse who is who works with folks with diabetes to various therapists and researchers and folks who have really just been and been activists, and they shared, and this was about the weight loss in injectables, and so Ozempic, and Wegovy, and others, and there will be more. But yet pointing out that this is very alarming, this is very concerning. Of course, it works, but it works temporary because we don't have the long-term data. It's not going to work for everybody. This was a medication for diabetes, and now folks with diabetes are having trouble getting this medication. Um, we're given this medication for diabetes in an amount that's like doubled or tripled, and so you're given an extreme amount, not just the amount that a person with diabetes would take, but an over amount for weight loss. And there's been numerous side effects pointed out, like, and not just side effects of like, oh, I have a headache, but side effects that are pretty harsh and very damaging to the body, involving a lot of organs, a lot of involving a lot of body systems, and so it's alarming. It's quite alarming. It's alarming that doctors are prescribing this without knowing, like, but you know more than I do what's happening to the body for about this. I also work with various doctors who are not happy with this and are actually quite concerned about this. So I'm not getting the split in this field about why some doctors are okay with it, some are not. And yet we have patients who are in large bodies saying, I want to lose weight. So that is also hard. So like on one end, from where I'm sitting and seeing that the safety end, I'm really concerned. And then hearing from, I'll call it a patient who has been in a large body saying, I I want this. This seems like it will work. I've tried numerous things. It hasn't worked. And so with gastric bypass surgery, I mean, we are getting more longer term data and pointing out that it's not as successful as we think it is. And so folks can gain the weight back. They would have to kind of maintain this very rigid small diet for the rest of their lives, and it has an impact on their organs and other parts of of their body. So there's a lot of very extreme medical procedures and measures done for weight loss, and it's dangerous.
Mm.
So,
I wholeheartedly agree. And I
Yeah.
think I've had clients again that have done both, along with like they've gone the Ozempic route. And then I've had clients that have had gastric bypass surgery. And what I will say is sort of a little bit like what we were talking before. The psychology behind it isn't addressed a lot of the time when they're choosing to do one of these things. So say they have the gastric, bypass surgery, they haven't, explored the reasons behind maybe it was overeating, maybe it was stress eating, as you were saying before, whatever was contributing to them being and to getting to that size, the psychology behind it wasn't addressed. So then they've had the gastric band surgery, and then there's been issues post that because, as you know, the size of your what you can digest is a lot smaller, and if you have
Right.
too much then you will vomit. So then they have issues with potentially vomiting, and they have to restrict their one, how much food they have, and two, sometimes the types of food they have because of that restriction. So then it creates a whole another set of problems around that too. So yes, I know, I'm not an expert in the area of, weight loss surgery or anything like that. But I think, if it's not managed very well, and if there isn't, that support emotionally, and for, our brain, and why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, then there can definitely be issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, not addressing at all someone's relationship with food. Very problematic. And also not and still that blame of like how did you get to this large size? And for a lot of folks, they've been dieting since like age 5, and that's how they've gotten to a large size. And so it's still this like constant blame on like what did you do to yourself as opposed to what happened to you. And also some folks are just folks in large bodies, and why we have such a response and a reaction to that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I was researching the other day, the top 20 myths when it comes to food and nutrition. And one of them is that if you're skinny, you're healthy. That's one of the things that people tend to
Right.
believe, that if you're skinny, then you'll be healthy. And it's definitely not true at all, because you can be thin and not eating, a very nutritious diet. You might be eating, a lot of processed foods, but, not a lot of, whole foods with vitamins and minerals. So you can still experience, nutritional deficiencies, energy deficiencies, even though you are thin. And then that sort of stigma around, well, if you're bigger, you're not healthy. But depending on our genetics and our, bone density and, all of these other factors, you can be very healthy at a bigger size and very unhealthy at a smaller size.
Yes. And often folks at smaller sizes, you can see like one is like folks who, let's say, aren't aren't making choices around food that are nourishing, and we can say that. And you're also seeing folks who are in a smaller size, like kind of dieting their entire life to keep that smaller size, and they often die. Because it's just that constant dieting, that constant deprivation. It means like your organs and your body are kind of operating subpar. But we're seeing that, but you're thin, so you're out, good for you. And oh wow, you're so disciplined. But that is just constant, this kind of like semi-starvation mode that a thin person could possibly be putting their bodies through, but promoting like, but I'm thin, so I'm healthy. Like, yeah, um, folks could die, and also like that kind of quality of life of being that kind of hyper vigilant around food, like it begs the question, like, is this fun?
Yeah. And it would be
Yeah.
stressful and draining
Right.
constantly.
Right.
And I have to touch on, in the last few years, there's been a rise in intermittent fasting being a big thing. Have you found that that's influenced any of the patients that you're seeing, and have people changed, and potentially developed, a poorer relationship with food and their body image because they've decided to, try fasting or jump on the, the fasting bandwagon, so
Right.
to speak?
You know, all these diets like intermittent fasting, keto, name something else. Like these are all like recycled diets. Like there's some version of it probably in the 70s, 80s. We've just given it a new name. So, we've been to the rodeo and back like with all these diets. What I what I note about the diets is like, first of all, it's just another gimmick. It's just another way for folks to kind of like move in one direction towards weight loss. I mean, they have this centering around health and feeling good, but really it is about weight loss. I mean, I actually wrote a piece about this, and I just went to the supermarket because there's still magazines out there, and they were all focused on intermittent fasting, keto this, that, and that, and that, and that. And so I took a whole bunch of pictures of them, and the tagline was always not about feel good. This is like great for your heart. It was always like, I dropped weight, I dropped weight, I dropped weight, I dropped weight, I dropped weight. So there's just not, it's not about health. It's not about nourishment. It's not about your body and your organs doing great. It is about weight loss. And so just with that, and also just it creates like a certain amount of rigidity in terms of I won't eat carbs. Now it's carbs. 20 years ago it was fat. Fat was bad, fat was bad, fat was bad, fat was bad. Now we put butter in our coffee. So it's just like, how have things changed so much? And that kind of with intermittent fasting or with other diets, it just again just sets up this rigidity, sets up this pattern eating. Folks will lose weight, sure, but I'm not sure how much you can keep the weight off. I and also I asked, like, if you want to experiment with food, absolutely. I think it is important to experiment with food. Our bodies age, we respond differently to food. I mean, I like, for instance, I can't have any animal dairy anymore. So it's important for me to experiment and be like, okay, what else can I eat? But knowing like, yeah, my body responds differently to food now and to various foods. So I say, like, be curious, experiment, but also like have flexibility. That there also has to be joy in food, and we can't demonize food and label foods into good or bad or healthy, not healthy, because all foods have a place. If you're absolutely so concerned about processed foods and there needs to be more vegetables, I'm like, great. Then what can we do to make produce more accessible for everybody?
Mm. Well, I think that's a whole
Yeah, that's
another
a whole other
topic,
food justice. Yeah,
isn't
you need to
it?
bring in
Like,
some guests on food justice. Yes,
yeah, and I would love to, because I think that is another area that really needs to be
absolutely,
addressed.
absolutely.
There's great stats. Lots of studies have been done to show, areas that lower socioeconomic areas have poorer access to fresh food. And it's there around the world. It's not just isolated to one country
Right,
either.
absolutely.
Again, I don't think we can fix that straight away, but having more conversations about it is important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you can see, like food is such a nuanced topic and touches on so many arenas, and the fact that it's politicized the way it is also upsetting, because I'm like, we have a right to food, and we have a right to good nourishing food, and we have a right to food that is good for our bodies and is enjoyable. Like that's a right that every single human being on this planet has. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. Now, before we wrap up our conversation, if,
Yeah.
people listening in could go off and instigate just one thing straight away from this conversation, what would you suggest?
I would suggest, like, what do you tell yourself about food and your eating? And think of like three things that you tell yourself. Write them down and say it out loud, and see like what comes up for you, and how could you, like, more on like your food rules, if and how you eat, and what you tell yourself about eating. And no, like, say it out loud and be like, huh, what comes up for you on that, and be incredibly curious with that, and be incredibly compassionate towards yourself with that. Because if you're like, oh my God, I do this. I can't believe I do this. It's like, it's not your fault. It's absolutely not your fault. And so just being very patient, very curious, very compassionate, so that way we can start to bring in more food liberation. And I think when we start with that and start like, yeah, I want, and I deserve that kind of liberation, it will carry on to others. And so topics like food justice will get interwoven with that kind of liberation.
Well, and I think, as you said, like, I'm an advocate for, food liberation and passionate about food. So, I shop at the local farmers market, or, go to the market to try to support local where
Absolutely.
possible, and, just going last week to the market, some of the prices at the market are cheaper than the supermarket. So sometimes it's just exploring those. And then if you find that out, then you can tell somebody else. So, that may open up their world to exploring somewhere else, trying new things, getting different fruit and veg, or whatever it may be. So I think the more
Right.
that we can talk about food and our experiences with food, the more that we can share with others and obviously help other people as well.
I love it. That's great.
Now, where can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
I am on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, with my name, Marcella Raimondo. On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Marcella Raimondo. You can find information for me on my website, www.marcellaedtraining.com. And you can subscribe to my newsletter. I also run trainings for professionals. About every other month, there are like a 1 hour overview on eating disorders. Also, if you're like, wow, I really want to explore my relationship with food, I am a psychologist. I am licensed in the state of California, and so if that's you and you're like, I'd like to give this a shot, I would love to work with you.
Amazing. Well, I'll link all those links up in the show notes too, so listeners can head there and check them out. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I think this is a really important topic that probably doesn't get enough, attention and airtime. And I think, listeners listening in, we all know someone, or maybe ourselves have experienced even just times in our life where we've had, difficult relationships with our body and food and, diet culture. So thanks for coming on and sharing such fantastic information.
Oh, thank you, Kate. Thank you for having me. This is great.